For a bit, so it wasn't me. I'm a pinch hitter tonight.
And let's move on to the question of security. I mean, we've heard about the issue of Ambassador.
Sorry, before we go to security, if I might, just add something else on the issue of governance. Because there is a conversation going on in diaspora communities across the United States about how can the diaspora really participate in the governance of the country. Earl mentioned like sitting on boards, and I think that would be revolutionary in terms of diaspora members sitting on boards. Some people are talking about some form of voting. We know there's a lot to be discussed and worked out in those sense. Some talk about some kind of political representation on the ground dedicated to diaspora and diaspora affairs. And so when you look at the contribution of the diaspora to Jamaica's economy, it is tremendous. I mentioned that in the past 10 years, the Jamaican diaspora's remittances alone, it's over $2 billion annually. During the worst year of the recession, the lowest the remittance dropped to was $1.8 billion. Some people argue that a way to say, oh, but that goes to families and relatives and so on. But those families and relatives are receiving the funds for education, for health, for consumer items, which means every dollar cent is spent in the Jamaican economy at home. It ends up in the Bank of Jamaica as foreign exchange. And Jamaicans pay taxes in Jamaican real estate that they own. They buy the goods and services produced by Jamaican businesses that are available to us in this country. And so when they go into a supermarket and they purchase the goods that have the Jamaica brand on it, it is contributing to the employment of a Jamaican.
And sometimes to the American. As you know, we are Jamaica's largest trading partner.
Of course, of course. But the reason why I raised this economic aspect of diaspora contribution is while we have that, and that's not going to stop, that can only get better, there is still no mechanism for Jamaicans to actually participate in the governance of the country, Jamaicans in the diaspora. And I think this is a conversation that we need to have.
Well, and I think that's a question for the diaspora itself. Obviously, the U.S. Embassy is neutral on that question.
Right, but we need willing partners in Jamaica.
Right, and so I think that's something for the diaspora itself to engage with.
I agree.
Ms. Clark, yeah.
I'm just saying you cannot get engaged in it, but you can whisper it, because you whisper many other things.
Well, so I will be completely frank with everyone here. People say that the U.S. government in many countries has an agenda, and I am authorized to say in Jamaica, yes, we do have an agenda, and I am happy to tell you what it is.
That's my problem.
It's very simple. It's 4 sentences. The first is not encouraging. No, the first is enhancing our security cooperation, especially for the protection of U.S. citizens. That's both the 2 million U.S. citizens that visit the island every year, whether they're single national or dual nationals, as well as the U.S. citizens here in the homeland to protect them from transnational threats, whether that be narco trafficking or the lotto scam. The second is encouraging responsible and democratic governance, part of the reason we're here having this discussion tonight. The third is enabling Jamaican health and prosperity. Part of that is, of course, ensuring that the flow of remittances keeps up. Foreign direct investment, the U.S. is, I believe, continues to be the largest foreign direct investor in Jamaica, or did Mexico pass us this year because of that one? Mexico may pass us 1 year because of one particular investment. And the third is something that's core to the United States anywhere in the world, and that is endorsing the concept of full and equal citizenship for all Jamaicans, period. Not, we're not advocating rights for any particular group. All Jamaicans, like all Americans, deserve full and equal rights. That's the democratic promise. We're working on all 4 of those issues in the US, and we're working on all 4 of those issues in Jamaica. And with that, I'd like to move on to the question of security. We've heard from Mr. Jarrett about the lotto scam. We've heard about transnational crime like narcotics trafficking. We haven't heard about some of the issues that affect Jamaicans on a day-to-day basis, the murder rate, the fact that 16% of emergency room visits are because of sexual assault, the effects on a day-to-day basis of the lotto scam on the ability for people to get remittances. So I'd like to start with Dr. King how can that dialogue, how can people outside of government, people think security, that's a government-to-government thing. How can the people outside of government influence the security?
In a conversation I had with a previous ambassador to the United Nations, he pointed out, Ambassador Mills, he pointed out that we speak about crime and violence in Jamaica as if it's a single word, that there's a problem with crime and violence. And he says to understand what goes on in Jamaica, we need to recognize that these are 2 separate problems. And if you think about it for a second, you will realize the amount of violence in Jamaica that is unrelated to crime, at least unrelated to the prior intent to commit a crime.
Or criminal enterprise.
Or criminal enterprise.
Organized crime.
Violence becomes a way to resolve a conflict. And it is an increasing recognition of this that makes us realize that outside of the security forces, all of the rest of us should be working on spreading means of conflict resolution, managing conflicts.
That's an essential point. I mean, we talk about crime, people mention the murder rate, the lotto crime, the narco trafficking, but the most common single violent crime in Jamaica is violence against women.
The violence against women, domestic violence, violence that breaks out over a domino game.
And that has nothing to do with an organized criminal enterprise.
And by the way, very often, even when there is crime and violence taking place together, the violence is unnecessary to the crime. Very often the crime has already been committed. And then the perpetrators visit violence upon the victim after the crime is completed. So, when 3 armed men rob an elderly woman living by herself in the hills and stab her, that's not necessary to get her belongings. It is completely redundant when you have 3 strong young men and an elderly woman. So violence is a separate problem.
And just to be clear, you're not encouraging people to rob elderly women in the hills.
Absolutely not.
So, Ambassador, do you agree with the previous ambassador and the sentiment expressed in his conversation?
I think that is correct, because I think part of what Damien is saying here is that violence often comes as a result of a lack of a conflict resolution process that they have access to. It's a lack of community policing, it's a lack of social exclusion and marginalization, and which was part of our discussions this morning. Anger management is a health issue, but it results in violence, oftentimes unnecessarily. And only if, when I was in elementary school in Jamaica, and which is a long time ago,
So like my husband over there.
we used to encourage fights. And what we would do essentially when two young boys of the age of 9 or 10 or less square off against each other, some other bigger bully would put a stone in his hand and say the first one to knock this out must throw the first punch. In other words, we encourage from among children to resort to violence to settle a dispute. And as they become adults, without the society itself providing access to justice, and I mean access that is affordable, you can say we have the court, we have the this, and we have the that. But if you cannot afford a good lawyer to help you to resolve your issue, you take it into your own hands. And the only result is violence. So crime and violence are really separate in that sense. But they're also linked together in many ways as well.
So with that, I would like members of the audience that are interested in asking questions, please come up to the mics. I'm going to give a chance for Mr. Jarrett and Ms. Clark to also respond. But if you are interested, please come up to the mic, and we'll have some orderly cues behind the mic. Mr. Jarrett.
I take another perspective to the issue of violence in Jamaica, also the security issue, and tie it back to the performance of the economy over many years to provide adequate numbers of jobs, to provide adequate level of education. And in particular, one could also argue that the issue of violence really tells the story of broken individuals, broken families. And one of the things we need to do, starting from as early as the very basic school, is to begin to create within children and within the community a greater sense of identity, a greater sense of hope, and a greater sense of a future opportunity for persons. The truth is that within Jamaica, for young persons up to the age of, I believe, up to 24, unemployment is around 40%, 44%. Mm-hmm. That's a high number. 44% of our youths are unemployed.
In any language.
To live in Jamaica and anywhere, you have costs. You need to pay for your cell phone. You need to pay for various things, and this unemployment also leaves able minds and bodies free to think of ways in which to commit crimes. And we need to find a way to ensure that our economy grows, that we provide enough resources to provide the social goods that's necessary to keep the community together, to learn to address the conflicts that Damien speak of. And it really starts at the very heart of creating an economy and a construct that sees growth, a construct that will enable families to invest time in raising children. It actually goes back to ensuring, as we said earlier, that from the area of maternal nutrition, that we begin to create hope within families, hope within children, to ensure that we create a gentler society to reduce the levels of crime.
And we have to remember that Jamaica is a very young society. That 65% are under 35, and half are under 21. Yeah. So Ms. Clark, and then when we get to the questions, I ask everyone, as you're thinking about your question, please, a question. Introduce yourself, let me know who you're addressing the question to, and then please try to ask the question in a single sentence with no more than one semicolon. Ms. Clark.
I just wanted to express the fact that not only in Jamaica, but in any area where there is poverty, it breeds crime.
That's great.
Poverty breeds crime because, first of all, everybody desires to take care of their family, but when they can't find a way to take care of their family, it results in both crime, and those crimes perpetuate itself. So it is for the society to figure out a way in which to provide for the poorest of the poor and to be able to provide early childhood education at a very early age so that young children grow with a self-esteem that will tell them that they can and that they will. So, but it takes a hand up from government, and it's not a handout, it's a hand up. I used to tell everybody here, I didn't come to America for a handout, I came for a hand up. And I used that hand up to do the things that I've done and to be able to help others to understand that they need to stand their ground and look at their own position and how they can help themselves and others.
I mean, clearly we have some meaty issues, and I see all four of my panelists always constantly wanting to jump in, but I do want to open it up. We very much believe in the public nature of this. We really see it as a dialogue between democracies, and we want to hear from the people that do bridge those two democracies. So please.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Donald Levy. I'm an educator. And I want to just say one thing first. Every 5 minutes in the United States, a female is raped. Every 29 seconds, a person is assaulted. And every 21 minutes, a person dies in the United States. I teach forensic science. And I want to just ask you two questions, if I can. One has to do with cybersecurity and the fact that all the remittances that we send to Jamaica and the issue of banking, money transaction. How are we going to deal with that issue? Do we have somebody or some entity in Jamaica that makes sure this issue is addressed? The second question is that for the young people in Jamaica, they have some guys are employed for 6 months, very highly educated, and they rotate them at hotel resorts and places like that. They can't keep a job for a full year. So the young people in Jamaica are suffering. How are we going to address that issue on the issue of governance?
Thank you. So on the question of cybersecurity, I'm going to pitch to my research expert here. How do you think we're going to be especially around the issue of remittances, dealing with cybersecurity? I know that the U.S. Embassy is already working on multiple programs, whether it's with the financial FID, what does FID stand for? They're the financial investigation unit. Yeah, financial investigation unit to ensure security on that. But do you have some more insight into that?
No, I was actually going to turn the question partially back to you because you guys are assisting greatly in that area.
I'm just moderating.
We started off this discussion by talking about governance, and I guess it's a very short step to extend it to public administration. One of the difficulties of public administration and governance in Jamaica is the fact that, there are economies of scale in governing, that it's just as difficult and just as complex to govern a small country, to administer a small country as a large one, but you have a much smaller public sector. And so the capacity issue is a real important issue. And that is why the partnerships that we have, such as the one with the United States in the area of security, is so important to fill those capacity gaps. And certainly when it comes down to cybersecurity, I think that is one where we need to, as much as possible, rely on our partnerships.
And Mr. Jarrett, why isn't the private sector employing people for more than 6 months at a time?
Well, let me first of all make the point that as it relates to cybersecurity, the remittance business is highly regulated in Jamaica. And there is a requirement within the regulations to ensure that there is security for the IT infrastructure that supports remittances. And I will also add that many entities in Jamaica actually invest quite significantly in ensuring that they're secure from hacking, from intrusion. And in some instances, you do have firms here in the United States because, of course, cybersecurity can provide a service from anywhere in the world. You do have firms here in the United States and in Europe who are monitoring the sites for financial institutions in Jamaica, observing any unusual activities, and will shut down those sites in the event that something should go wrong. So Jamaica has to play its part in ensuring that the global network of financial institutions are safe. And so we have an obligation, and we have put in place those safeguards to protect firms. And you will... Yes.
But want to do a business-to-business transaction. When my corporation needs to send money, the fees are outrageous.
Well, yes,
have some type of...
and when you're sending those fees, those are typically going to SWIFT or international payment networks. And it is expensive, but those networks do invest quite significantly in ensuring that their systems are safe from cyber attacks. It's an expensive game, and regrettably we have to do it because we do have people from all over the world. I mean, in terms of, I know as a fact I've seen where persons are trying to enter sites from places very far from here, in the eastern part of the world. You have people whose job it is to get up every morning and to try to break into the sites of financial institutions around the world.
So seeing as how we've crossed 8 o'clock, what I'm going to ask is for 2 people to ask questions. So please keep it to a question, and then we'll take 2 questions at a time. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name is Creston Brown, and my background is financial services. And my question, I guess, is going to be directed to you, Mr. Jarrett. I know that a lot of money changers in Jamaica, the cambios, they're coming under a lot of pressure.
Yes.
In the sense that banking relationships that they're having with institutions in the United States are being severed and terminated.
Yes.
And that is definitely putting an impact on those people who participate in that line of business. We're here talking about dialogue between democracies and bilateral relationships and things like that. And you all, someone mentioned that over $2 billion annually come to Jamaica through remittances.
So I've counted so far 3 semicolons. So please come to your question.
So it's like, what is being done to assist Jamaican businesses in this regard?
So what is being done to assist with the, what's known as a corresponding banking relationship? Thank you. Next question, please. In fact, we'll take 3 questions if we can keep it to the what is being done to assist with a corresponding banking relationship type of question.
My name is Linda Bailey. I'm an economist and an educator. And I've had reasons recently to be talking to people in the diaspora about contributing to Jamaica. Everybody wants to contribute. Nobody trusts the government. Nobody wants to put money in. I know people in foundations who won't approach their foundations because they believe that the government is going to steal any money and it's not going to reach the people that it's helped. What does the government need to do? And are there people here who would actually push that issue that the government needs to be able to show people that they can actually put money and help the poor people in Jamaica? Because nobody I have spoken to believes that any money sent to a government organization will actually reach the people.
So the question is, what can the government of Jamaica do to build the confidence of the diaspora that funds received will go?
And we need some people to push for that, because everybody I've spoken to wants to contribute. People are at foundations. People are working for companies with foundations, and they won't ask the companies because they do not want to. The companies won't engage in unethical behavior, no bribery, and so on.
Right.
So if the company needs to bribe, they're not going to ask their company to give money to Jamaica.
Sir?
My name is Leslie Clark. I'm the better half of Unit Clark.
Is a better half or the half? Go ahead, ask your question, better half.
So I'm expecting a better question from you then.
Suicide. That was suicide. I have a few questions.
Only one you can ask.
Only, I'm hearing from Ms. Clark that it's one question.
Yes, she's the boss.
No semicolon.
She's the boss, though.
No preferential
I
treatment.
have a few questions. I don't think I'll have the time, but let me just start.
One question. We can.
One question?
Yeah, we can get you to queue. We'll probably get to the queue if we get the one question in.
I forgot what the other 2 questions were.
One.
I don't know where to start, but anyway, one of the things that, first of all, let me say this about the relationship with the United States and Jamaica, and maybe other parts of the world. That's the world democracy. Democracy to different countries based on various situations and customs and so on vary. what I think the United States does is to judge people based on what they conceive as being democracy. And that creates a lot of problems, both culturally and otherwise. I think that's an area, for example, while maybe human rights might be international, I think the United States have tried to carry that out in a lot of instances. And as I said, it doesn't apply. Their interpretation or their understanding of human rights vary in other countries.
So the question being, because I've heard both a semicolon and a period there.
That is the question.
Okay, the other thing is, with regards to conduct of Jamaicans, I remember as a youngster growing up, we had a lot of values taught to us, primarily by parents, and also in schools, elementary schools, and those who went to private schools. That has apparently disappeared. And I think that's a key thing in how people grow up and the values they carry with them as they grow up in terms of crime and so on.
So could I phrase your question as how can the culture of parenting affect the issue of security?
Right. I've made a couple of statements rather than a question. Okay. And I suggest that members on the dais can view it in the way they see it. Okay.
So I guess I'll pose that to Ms. Clark first. We'll take, and then if I can ask the lady behind you, so we. Yeah.
Okay. So you say I can go to the back again.
No. I just want to make sure we give everyone a chance. So I would say the first question is. Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Clark.
No, I guess the question is, times change, and we've been out of Jamaica before Jamaica was an independent nation. There was a time when parents, community, everybody raised you. That doesn't happen in most cultures now, and you can't look back at the 30s, the 1930s, and think that in 2016, things are going to be the way they were when you were a child. And so you have to just know that families have a lot more pressure. Families are required to do a lot more with less. And we have to understand that the support that we give, which is why the dialogue this evening is how do we create the partnership that will make sure that there is that kind of flow, that families feel secure, and that for those of us in the diaspora, when we send $2 billion, we want to make sure it is circulating not only to the family to which it came, but that it is also helping the economy to grow, and how you tackle with that.
So Ambassador, as a former representative of the government, for the second question, what would you suggest the government of Jamaica could do to build confidence in the diaspora that its resources would be used for the development of the nation?
Well, first of all, one would have to define what we mean by resources, because when you send money, which the vast majority of remittances are going to family members, it's going to pay for school, for education, for food, for housing, for clothing, whatever. There's also money that goes in to pay for a house mortgage or real estate taxes.
No, for sure, but I think
so on. But here is the issue. Here's the issue. The government doesn't have to guarantee that the money you send to your family gets to your family. Your family will tell you if they didn't get the money.
Right, but I think
And they do get it.
what we're talking about is on a different level. If we're talking about bringing in, again, say the Carnegie Foundation wants to go down and perhaps say work on the public library system.
Yeah, but
And how would someone working in the diaspora convince their boss in the Carnegie
because
Foundation?
there is a track record
Yeah.
of foundations working effectively in Jamaica with civil society, with NGOs, etc. So that already is an established fact.
So let's hear what.
But the problem exists. We are hearing that that confidence does not exist. So what we have done so far clearly has not built that confidence. So something new has to be done.
No, but you know where the lack of confidence is not in the foundations themselves. The lack of confidence is in the Jamaicans who connect to these foundations. I have seen this. Look, I have known of a Jamaican lady who works for a large NGO, and they have annual conferences, and she is a conference planner for this NGO, and she refuses to take the conference to Jamaica because of her belief that these people would be unsafe. 2 million Americans go to Jamaica every year. Nothing happens to them. So the problem oftentimes, this perception oftentimes is as a result of the doubt and the perception of the Jamaicans that are interfacing with these organizations, these foundations. I know this to be the truth.
So Mr. Jarrett, let's keep on with that second question, and then we'll take another question. If you can answer both that as someone who's worked with American foundations, have you seen that lack of confidence with the Jamaican government from American foundations?
Not that much. In fact, I would say safely that the situation has changed over many years. There was a time in Jamaica, and many will recall, when funds went to build a school, and when they went to look for the school, they found a piece of empty land. But things have changed quite significantly, and I think people today are more evidence-based. So we look at things like the Transparency International reviews. We look at the various reviews that look at corruption. Jamaica is still not where it wants to be, but we have been improving over time. And in fact, the flows of voluntary dollars and even dollars from the diaspora into projects in Jamaica, not just the family, continues to grow. The high school support, the support for various churches, hospitals continue to increase on an annual basis. But the point that is being made here is that there's still a level of trust that needs to be, which is missing as it relates to direct relationships with the government of Jamaica. And I think part of that has to do with the government's inability to communicate clearly what it's doing. And as we have heard, many of us need to become more informed as to what's happening in Jamaica so that we can speak more honestly and currently to the state of play within the island.
And on the corresponding banking issue, I know Dr. King has worked very closely on that. What suggestions do you have for those who are worried about those relationships?
Well, as it happens, the latest project of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute just published is a report on the correspondent banking problem, which we did with the generous sponsorship of Jamaica National. 2 points. One, it's a systemic problem. That is to say, it's not a problem that comes about because some person in a powerful position has made a policy decision that he can be lobbied to reverse. All of the actors in the financial system and the financial regulation are behaving in what really is in their best interest. And it results in an outcome that is detrimental to retail activities in the Caribbean. So it has to be appreciated that it's a difficult problem. No one actor changing a decision is going to change that. However, the report does highlight that there are a range of things that we can start moving towards that is going to help us to help ourselves. And I can just direct you to the report. I think we have a couple of copies here, actually. But you can go to the capricaribbean.org website and download the full report.
And I should say, I would be remiss to not say that on Tuesday, a senior official from the U.S. Department of Treasury will be in Kingston having a private discussion with the private sector around this issue and figuring out how to build those market-based relationships. Man.